Hello everyone, this is Ryan and lesson 31 of Learning JavaScript. In this lesson we'll be learning about component arrays. So the component arrays allow us to manipulate hyperlinks, images and form elements as well as forms. So you'll see from what I have here in front of me, I have two hyperlinks, I have two pictures and I have two form elements. I have an input box and I have a button that you can click on. So using JavaScript, I want to be able to display values from links, pictures and form elements to my div. So I've got an empty div at the bottom of the page, and let's go now to our JavaScript file. So to start off with, let's just make some notes. What is a component array? Well, under the document object, we have an array called links. So link 0 would always refer to the very first link on the page. There's the link 0. Link 1 would refer to the next link on the page, and so on. So just by creating HTML, you're already populating these arrays without you even realizing it. You don't have to manually add items or entries to these arrays. So there's document.links, there's document.images, and there's also document.forms. There are one or two others as well, but these are the most important ones. So under document.forms, there's a sub array called document.forms.elements, because there can be multiple forms on a page. In this case, I only have one form on the page, so I would have to refer to it by saying 0 inside the square brackets. But inside a form, there can also be many elements. There could be text boxes, check boxes, drop down boxes, buttons, and so on. So in this case, I've got two elements. I've got two input types. Input type equals text and input type equals button. So this counts as element 0 and elements 1. So elements 0 would refer to the input box and elements 1 would refer to the button. So now that we know about these component arrays, let's see if we can actually put them to use. So to display some of these values, we could say block.inHTML equal to, and let's start with a simple one. Let's display the href of this hyperlink here. So we say document.links 0 because we want the first hyperlink dot href. And if I refresh, you can there see the hyperlink value of that first hyperlink. If I want the second hyperlink, just change it to a 1. And there's the second value. Okay, so how would we get, for example, this text over here? Lesson 30. This is actually the inner HTML property because it's between the opening A tag and the closing A tag. So we use the inner HTML property of the second hyperlink. So the second hyperlink is links 1 and we want inner HTML. There you have it, lesson 30. So if I wanted Google, I would use link 0 because that's the very first link on the page. Now let's look at some of the picture properties. So for example, if I wanted the alt text of the second image, I would use document.images. 0 would refer to the first image on the page, 1 would refer to the second image on the page, and I want the alt text. Okay. If I want the width of the first image, it would be images 0 dot width. So that we know is 73. And let's see what happens if I run it. 73. In the same way, you could get the SRC of the image, or the height of the image, or any of the normal properties of an image. What about forms? Well, a form can have an action. Normally goes to a submit page of some sort. So if my action is submit.html, I could output that by saying document.forms. How many forms do I have? Only one. .action. And there's the submit page. And if I want the value of this input box is an element of the form. So remember, there's a sub array called the elements array. So we need to say document.form0 because it's the first form on the page. Elements 0 because it's the first element on the page. It's the input box. And then I want the value inside of that box, which is email. You can see they match. There's the value. It's printed it out. What if I want the value of the button? Click me. Well, there's my button, and there's the value of it. It's the second element. So that would be elements 1 dot value. Click me. So what happens if I want the size of this input box? Well, there's the size. Which element is it? It's the first element, which means it's element 0 in the array. So change it to a 0 and change it to size. And there's a 20, so that's the size of the box. So now you can see how you can use the component arrays to output specific properties of either links, images, or form elements. So we can also give these things IDs, as we learned about in the past, and then use document.getElementById to retrieve each HTML tag. But in the case of hyperlinks, pictures, and form elements, it's often easier just to make use of the built-in component arrays, because these automatically populate as you create the HTML code for links, images, or form elements. These arrays automatically populate themselves. So sometimes it's just much easier just using these arrays. The other advantage of using the component arrays is that you can use for loops to loop around them. So for example, if I wanted to display the alt attributes of every single image on the page, and I had like 50 images, it could take quite a lot of coding to do that. But by using a for loop, we can make our lives much easier. So let me show you. We'd have a for loop, and we would start the loop at 0, and then we would say x less than document dot forms 0, because we're talking about the first form. We're talking about the images, aren't we? So document.images.length, because remember, document.images is an array. So the length property of the array we learnt about when we handled arrays. And then we increment our loop. Okay, so now that we're in a for loop, we can print to our panel block.innerHTML plus equals, and then I could actually print out document.images. Which image do I want? X, because that's in the loop, dot alt, and then I'll just put a BR after each one. So let's see. Now I get both alt attributes printed out. In the same way, I could get, let's say, the inner HTMLs of both of these hyperlinks. So I would then say loop around the links array. So it would be document.links.length, and then I would use document.linksx, and not the alt but the inner HTML property. So there it's a for loop around all the hyperlinks in the document. So this can be very useful if you want to do something to every image on the page, or do something to every hyperlink on the page. Maybe loop around every single form element in a form to do validation or something like that. So now you've seen how we can access the existing properties of links, images, and form elements. How about setting these properties? Well, we can set the properties just the same way we retrieved the properties. So for example, if I wanted to change the text on this link, I could just say document.form.links. Which link is it? Remember, this is an array. It's the first link. .inner HTML, and I'll set it to a value. So there you can see it's changed. In the same way, I could set the title attribute of the second link to be something different. So remember, the title attribute pops up a little tooltip which hovers for a few seconds. So to change the tooltip, I would say document.links1, it's the second hyperlink, .title, Ryan changed this. So we're using JavaScript to manipulate the existing HTML. There you can see the pop-up tooltip, Ryan changed this. How would I change the text on this button? Let's make the text just change to any old value will do. We just say document.form0, because there is only one form, .elements, remember, how many elements do I have? That's the first element, that's the second element. So I want to change the value of the second element. So it will be elements1.value. And there you can see the text has changed on the button. So now you can see how we can manipulate HTML links, images, and form elements using the component arrays.